The late morning sun bathed Reed Farm in a warm, golden light. The barn buzzed with the sounds of laughter, conversations, and the rustle of produce being exchanged at the bustling farmer's market. Jack stood near the old tractor, demonstrating its restored engine to a group of curious children. Nearby, Eleanor Reed moved between the market stands, her face glowing with a happiness Jack had rarely seen since arriving. But then, the sound of multiple engines cut through the cheerful atmosphere. Heads turned. A fleet of sleek black vehicles pulled up, their tires crunching ominously over the gravel. Doors swung open with synchronized precision, and from the lead car emerged Victor Blackwell, flanked by two men in dark suits and a woman with a stiff leather briefcase. Two county officials followed, their faces tight and uncomfortable. Conversations stuttered into silence. The children stopped playing. Eleanor stood taller, her shoulders squared as Blackwell approached. "Eleanor Reed," Blackwell called out, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "I have here documentation proving my company's right to claim approximately 30% of this property due to outstanding debts. Effective immediately." A collective murmur rippled through the crowd. Jack dropped his wrench and moved instinctively to Eleanor's side. His heart hammered, not out of fear, but out of fury. "This is hardly the time or place for this, Victor," Eleanor said calmly, her voice cutting cleanly through the stunned silence. Blackwell gave a tight, insincere smile. "On the contrary, Eleanor, these fine people deserve to know they are trespassing on land that will soon be repurposed for a brighter, more profitable future." He gestured toward the woman with the briefcase. She pulled out a thick stack of papers and handed them to one of the officials, who in turn approached Eleanor with visible reluctance. Mayor Dawson shoved his way through the crowd. "Now, just a minute, Blackwell," he barked. "This farm is pending historical landmark designation." Blackwell turned to him coolly. "Designation or not, Mayor, this debt predates any such status. It's legally binding, signed by Jonathan Reed himself before his death." Eleanor's hand trembled slightly as she accepted the documents. She flipped through the pages, her face paling. "That's my father's signature," she said, her voice low and hollow. Jack frowned. Something was wrong. He stepped closer and took the papers from her, studying them carefully. His mechanic's eye, trained to notice the smallest discrepancies, caught it almost immediately. "This signature," Jack began, voice rising with urgency, "it doesn't match the others." A hush fell. Samuel Thompson, the retired attorney who had been quietly observing from the edge of the crowd, stepped forward. "Let me see that," he said gravely. Blackwell's jaw tightened as Samuel took the papers. He pulled a battered leather-bound book from his satchel, his old notary journal, and flipped it open with sure hands. "I notarized every legal document Jonathan Reed ever signed," Samuel said to the gathering crowd, voice steady. "Jonathan was hospitalized the month this document was supposedly signed. Gallbladder surgery. He couldn't even hold a pen." The weight of his words crashed over the crowd like a wave. Blackwell laughed, a hollow, forced sound. "An old man's faulty memory isn't proof of forgery." Samuel ignored him. He pointed to a page in his journal. "Here it is, entry dated 2 days before the alleged signing. Jonathan Reed, hospital admission. No signatures made during that period." He looked up, his gaze sharp as a blade. "This is a fraud." Gasps rose from the gathered farmers, townspeople, and vendors. Jack turned to Blackwell, his voice iron. "You forged a dying man's signature to steal his daughter's land." Blackwell's carefully curated mask cracked for a fraction of a second. "Prove it," he hissed. Samuel raised his voice. "We will. This county has laws. Forgery. Fraud. Attempted theft under false pretenses." The two county officials, caught between duty and politics, exchanged a glance. One pulled out a phone and spoke urgently into it, likely calling for the sheriff. Victor Blackwell's face drained of color. Without another word, he spun on his heel and stormed back toward his sedan, his entourage scrambling behind him like panicked insects. As his tires spat gravel and dust in his hasty retreat, the barn erupted into cheers. People clapped each other on the back. Farmers who had barely spoken in years embraced like brothers. Children laughed and waved handmade signs in the air, signs that said "Save Reed Farm" and "Our Land, Our Future." Eleanor stood rooted to the ground, the fraudulent document fluttering from her fingers. Jack turned to her, caught her shoulders in his hands. You fought, Eleanor, he said fiercely. And you won. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but didn't fall. Instead, she lifted her chin and nodded, strength radiating from her core. We won, she corrected softly. Mayor Dawson moved toward them, beaming with pride. Miss Reed, he said, voice carrying across the gathering. Consider the Reed farm officially protected. And Blackwell's operation, he added with a grim smile, is under full investigation by the state attorney's office. He won't touch another acre of Riverdale soil. The roar of approval from the townspeople was deafening. Jack looked around, the barn bursting with life, the fields stretching golden and endless into the horizon. The people who had banded together not for profit, but for heritage, for principle, for heart, and realized this wasn't just Eleanor's victory. It was all of theirs. Noah barreled into them, Scout barking joyously at his side. Dad, he cried. Miss Eleanor. We saved it. We really saved it. Jack scooped his son up into his arms as Eleanor laughed, a sound as clear and free as the open sky above them. She reached out, drawing them both into a fierce embrace. For the first time in so long, Jack Mitchell didn't feel like a man just passing through. He felt like he had come home. The days that followed felt like waking up from a long, restless sleep and finding the world renewed. Riverdale buzzed with excitement. The news of Blackwell's defeat and the Reed farm's salvation spread through town like wildfire, rekindling a sense of pride in the community that had been dormant for too long. Eleanor moved through it all with quiet dignity. She accepted congratulations with a modest smile, her shoulders lighter, her laughter easier. For the first time in years, she wasn't fighting a lonely battle. She was leading a movement, and Jack was right there beside her. At the town meeting a week later, the mayor officially announced the historical and cultural designation of Reed Farm. More than that, the county council approved a substantial grant to develop the farm into a permanent community agricultural center, an education hub, a working farm, and a monument to the spirit of Riverdale. Jack stood in the back of the crowded town hall, Noah perched on his shoulders, Scout sitting loyally at his feet. As the mayor listed the farm's new future plans, workshops, youth programs, seasonal festivals, Jack felt a slow, deep pride settling into his bones. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was a part of something lasting. Later that evening, as the stars scattered like silver dust across the velvet sky, Jack found himself back under the old oak tree with Eleanor. The same hill where so much had changed between them. The summer air was warm and fragrant with the scent of fresh-cut hay and wildflowers. Noah and Scout chased fireflies in the distance, their laughter floating on the breeze. Eleanor leaned against the rough bark, her hair loose around her shoulders, catching the starlight. We did it, she said softly, looking out over the fields now protected by law, by memory, and by the will of a community that refused to let go of what mattered. Jack stepped closer, the familiar warmth of her presence pulling him in. You did it, he said. You fought for all of this, long before I ever showed up. Eleanor turned to him, her smile tender. I fought to keep it alive. But you made me see it could be more. You made me believe again. Jack's heart twisted at the vulnerability in her voice. He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. We made each other believe, he said. They stood there for a long moment, the farm stretching wide and endless before them, a canvas of promise. Finally, Eleanor squeezed his hand. Jack Mitchell, stay? Not just for the work. Not just for the farm. Stay for us. Jack felt the ground steady beneath him in a way it never had before. For years, he had lived in motion, always braced for the next goodbye. But here, under this ancient tree, with Eleanor's hand in his and Noah laughing nearby, he realized something simple and profound. He didn't want to run anymore. He wanted to build. I'm already home, Jack said, his voice low but certain. Eleanor smiled, a radiant thing that stole his breath, and leaned into him, her head resting against his chest. The old oak tree bore silent witness as two people who had spent their lives battling alone finally found peace in each other. Months passed, and autumn bled into winter. The farm thrived, even through the colder months. Jack's workshop buzzed with repairs and classes. Eleanor's community programs flourished, drawing visitors from neighboring counties. Noah excelled in school, his confidence blooming. Scout became a fixture at every event, the unofficial mascot of Reed Farm. And Jack, who had once believed himself broken beyond repair, discovered that fixing things wasn't just about engines and bolts. It was about planting roots, nurturing them, and letting them grow. One crisp December evening, as snow dusted the fields in soft white, Jack stood on the front porch of the farmhouse, a small velvet box hidden in his pocket. He watched Noah and Scout racing through the light snow, their laughter ringing clear and joyful. Eleanor joined him, slipping her arm around his waist. Jack turned to her, heart pounding harder than it had the day he first set foot on this land. "I was thinking," he said carefully, pulling the box from his pocket and opening it to reveal a simple silver ring. "Maybe it's time I made it official." Eleanor's breath caught. Her eyes, luminous with emotion, met his. Jack dropped to one knee, the snow crunching softly under him. "Eleanor Reed," he said, voice thick with feeling, "will you marry me?" For a heartbeat, everything was still. Then Eleanor laughed, a bright, pure sound that echoed across the fields, and dropped to her knees with him, her hands cupping his face. "Yes, Jack Mitchell," she whispered fiercely. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Noah hooped from the yard, running up with Scout barking madly beside him. Jack scooped him into their embrace, and for a long, breathless moment, the three of them, Jack, Eleanor, Noah, and Scout, held tight to each other, a family forged not by blood, but by choice, by hope, by the stubborn, beautiful belief that no past was too broken to build a future on. The farm stood behind them, silent and steadfast. Their home, their beginning, their forever.